Everything we know, from people and ants to stars and galaxies to quarks and atoms, the entire universe, might just be a simulation running inside a supercomputer inside an even bigger universe. Ancient philosophers said that the universe is a dream that we're waiting to wake up from. In this dream world of the imagination, anything is possible. All cultural items, from the dreams of our rodent-like ancestors, to books, to television shows, are merely permutations of the reality we think we live in. Today's age of computers and video games places simulations at the center of our cultural consciousness. A select group of us perform simulations for fun and profit, and we call them games, role-playing and otherwise. We live to run simulations. Join us on the Simulationist podcast as we explore our culture of simulation.
Hello, and once again, welcome to another iteration of the Simulationist podcast. This is the 86th iteration of these simulations. We are recording it on the 27th of April, 2014.
Or are we recording it on the 86th of April, and this is only our 27th iteration?
It might just be.
Are you sure about our numbers here?
I don't know. Maybe the the listeners can check for themselves. I will mention to the listeners that that other mysterious voice you hear is the same mysterious voice you hear every week on the Simulationist podcast. My co-host, Ryan Kirkby, is with me as always.
And the first voice, and the best voice as always, is the proper full host, Josh Trelevin.
Okay, well, I was going to say the other co-host, but yeah, we can argue.
Well,
about
I can only be a co-host if someone is hosting. Otherwise, it's like just two co-hosts, and then like who's the proper host?
I thought that was how it worked.
I thought it was a host and a co-host. Like you can only have one captain of a ship. I'd be the equivalent of like the first mate.
You know, how about this? Our captains are the listeners.
Ah, I can dig it, man. That's deep. That's deep. It's so deep, if you turned it on its side, it would be a tunnel.
All right,
Damn.
so let's jump into a recap of all the simulations, the fun simulations that we've been running this week, shall we?
I've only really been running one simulation. It's been a very busy week for me, and I've been paying a lot of attention to my daughter because she's got so much energy. Where she's getting this energy, I don't know, but I'm focusing on that. And I've just been working in Minecraft, same city.
Oh, that's good.
I changed.
It's just a city now.
Well, that's the thing is, I worked out. I should have about 150 citizens.
Wow.
I've finished developing the third quarter, so now all I've got to do is make the harbor area look proper and actually like a harbor. Mind you, it's just for a small lake, so it's not going to be like really big or anything. I did expand the lake out so it contacts a nearby neighboring lake, so it looks at least a little bit bigger. Not by much, though. So yeah, I've been working mostly in the underground lately, finishing off there. There's some plans I've got about maybe making some monster spawning areas under there to see if I can't focus so that instead of zombies wandering in through like the front gates of the city, they'll wind up more naturally spawning in the darkest area throughout the day, and thus preventing the citizens from getting eaten or scared from this stuff. Because I really have to do something. I've just been so annoyed at the golems lately. The number of times I had to go up from the basement because I hear zombies pounding on the doors to see golems walking right by them and doing nothing about the zombies. It seems unless they actually hurt a villager, they don't do anything.
Yeah, I don't understand the AI on those guys. It's unfortunate.
There definitely needs to be a major tweak to the AI of at least town guarding golems. The AI of the citizens would probably help out fairly well, too. I did have to clear out a room or two because like a zombie managed to bite them as they were, opening the doors and moving back and forth.
Oh, yeah.
That said, I've got enough of a stable base population. I don't think any zombie siege over the course of like one night is going to clear me out. There's just that many citizens.
Now, but that was just a breach, right? You have a wall or whatever.
I've got 3 doorways I could close up if I ever need to.
Yeah.
I just keep them open because 1, it looks better, and 2, I've got enough citizens. I don't need to worry about losing the occasional one. Maybe that's why I'm being so dark and creepy down underground with the citizens that managed to get down there by accident. Which I've changed my modus operandi on. The last week, as we explained, I started, doing stuff like making them, go into dark areas of the underground where there was no proper protection. Zombies would spawn, and I watched from on high as they were eaten alive.
Yeah, okay.
This week,
Still doing that?
No, actually I changed. I kept the light, but I dug out passage areas to the bottom height of where I wanted to go, and I just, the AI is that they want to get into certain areas. They will always try and get into the houses closest to the center of the town, which I suppose is a good basic AI defense mechanism. But if there's too many people there, they can't get in, which is why I have peasants, villagers, city folk, whatever you want to wind up calling them, sitting outside in the middle of the night where zombies can just come up and bite on their skulls. So as it turns out, as long as you're a member of the town, you'll want to try and get into those areas too. Mm-hmm. Even though you're underground and you can't get to it. So they'll all try and go to that one centralized spot in what's considered to be in the house, even though they are like 3-4 vertical levels down.
Oh, yeah.
And so I expanded the size of my one trench, and so that right where they wanted to be was half on the higher up part and half on the lower part. And so they were all forcing each other off the side of their small cliff, hurting each other, climbing up the stairs as quickly as they could, forcing each other off until only one remained.
Oh, okay.
So I guess it was kind of like a jigsaw thing, like forcing them to fight each other for survival as they stoop to horrible levels as they push each other off of a cliff in the middle of the underground night.
Each week, Ryan, I swear you're reaching a new level of depravity.
Well, that's the thing, is this week it wasn't my fault, because they were the ones pushing each other off with their bad AI and horrible sense of group, preservation skills. It was every NPC for themselves. Except for one who got stuck in a loop, just wandering around on one square in circles as fast as he could. Which, by the way, is actually really fast if you've ever seen a villager run.
Yeah.
They go a lot faster than you can rush.
Huh.
So I don't know what they've got that going for them, but if you ever see an NPC warrior, be careful, because they can run pretty quick. So there you go. That might be in a future update, I've been told.
Well, I'm thankful that zombies can't run. That's
one thing. That's their one weakness, is that you can just outwalk them. But he was running around into a circle until I loaded the game up, and then he just kind of ran himself off the cliff and just fell to his own doom there. So now I have no more villagers underground, and I'm able to work in peace.
Okay.
Well, as peaceful as it can be underneath the city. Like I said, I've got 150 people humming and opening and closing doors very frequently. I have to blast music. I go over to, Alt-Tab over to YouTube and find some good old funk music from the 70s. Crank the volume up just so I can't hear the and door slamming as they go creepy, weird dorgies.
That reminds me, have you seen the commercial that goes, I'm the man, I'm the man, I'm the man.
I've heard the song.
You can tell everybody. That's my horrible singing version of it.
Well, you're just doing a quick thing, and we don't want to have to pay royalties, so.
Yeah, I think it's bad enough that nobody's gonna come after us. So, and in the commercials, like, there's a whole series of them where, it's a sports guy, and he's like going to the opposing team, and like all the sports fans of the other team are like yelling at him and like mad at him and hating as haters tend to do.
Fan haters.
So he puts on the noise canceling headphones, and then he's just listening to this song about how he's the man. You can tell everybody.
I have not seen that.
I was thinking that would be a good parody for that.
Noise canceling headphones, because I don't want to hear the creepy upstairs neighbors with their weird dorgies. Yes.
Yeah.
That said, I didn't dig deep enough. Even if I'm on the bottom level where I'm putting in the basement tile, as I like to call it, I can still hear them. Yeah. The doors, not so much, but there's a lot of humming as they go there.
And when you say humming, it's funny. I picture the Dr. Seuss, like the Whoville people humming.
Honestly, the way they're moving around, it's much more like the star-bellied sneetches that live on the beaches.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're just so furious and stupid. I have a hard time seeing them as anything that can be associated with any sort of wisdom, like the Whoville smart people that have inner peace.
Okay, so yeah, you don't have a lot of respect for these villagers.
I initially started with it, but their blatant and fragrant stupidity has withered my opinion of them. Like, they are in sore need of an AI upgrade. Fingers crossed, an upcoming update makes them smarter individuals, or at least some different sounds, some more variety, because right now it's just 150 people saying, and it's really noisy.
I kind of like it. At least, like, in my villages, I don't have I don't have villages that have hundreds in them, but I have villages 30 or 40, and I kind of enjoy it because I go in and out. Like, I don't spend a lot of time in the village, so I like coming. Like, when I come back, it's like, oh, it feels like, I'm going to a new place, and it's like, like a market. It's all busy, and there's, people selling this and that, and closing doors, and yeah,
I think if I start in another city, it's going to be a little bit more spaced out and not so high density for my population.
Okay, yeah.
Although that said, my next stage in building is going to wind up being to see if I can build a second city on top of the first one by using glass for the streets.
Yeah, I fear for you because I think I've seen bugs where, like, if you have a certain number of stories, that they will keep generating in the top story and then they'll migrate down lower. I suppose if you don't give them a path, they can't migrate.
Yeah, the only way I'm getting in and out right now through the basement is through ladders, which they do not use.
I don't think they can't use ladders. But you can. It's possible to do an infinite villager generator, and I have seen videos in which players have had to basically slaughter thousands of villagers, including the children, in order to make their game actually run.
Well, fortunately for me, all I have to do is provide a walkway, a very narrow walkway, to right underneath the center part of the village, and they'll all force themselves off to their own deaths.
Oh yeah, that's true.
The bonus point on that is I don't wind up having golems attack me, because I was doing some work up above this week, putting another brick walkway in, and there were some villagers in my way, and I'm like trying to get rid of the dirt so I could do some proper stuff. And of course, villager walks right in the way, and I wind up smacking him. The next thing I know, I'm up in the air as a golem just uppercuts me, and I wind up dying from that.
Yeah.
Well, I used my death as a good thing in the end, because I wound up drowning myself a few times thereafter to see where I'd spawn in the spawn point, and you were right.
Okay.
There's a random zone of it. I always figured you'd start up in the same spot, but that only happens with beds.
Yeah.
So I've made like a spawn point that's like a fake spawn point, like I assume like, ooh, you'll always appear here. But that's just for my little park to look nice, because I turned the spawn area into a wooded parkland.
Oh, that's good. And it's lit up and everything with torches?
Very much so, yes.
Okay.
All the trees are perfectly spaced. Although for some reason the only trees that seem to grow for the oak are the massive, giant, sprawling ones. No regular-sized ones grow up there.
Is it in a forest or in?
It is in what is considered to be a forest biome, although I did kind of clear-cut the whole area as I reduced it down to a nice level spot and then put the trees back. I don't know if that causes a difference. I haven't heard about that.
Well, the last I remember, it may have changed, but it was forests were not especially likely to grow big trees, but plains were. Like there was a bigger percentage chance of a tree being a giant tree in the plains than anywhere else. Because I guess the idea with the plains tree was that you'd have these giant trees in the middle of nowhere.
Which still don't compare to the 2x2 jungle trees they've got.
Yeah, exactly. Have you run into stuff like that in your world?
Not in this current world. I did used to do some local harvesting of the jungle trees because they were so time efficient. For underground farming, is you just basically start at the top and then work yourself down to the bottom, replant the trees, and then go up and leave.
Yeah.
They're a lot more annoying to do when you're above ground, though. When you have to start at the bottom of the tree, and it's like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Bring a snack. This thing's going to take me a day and a half to chop down. Although I wouldn't mind putting some jungle trees into my park a little bit later on, just to have some nice volume in there. Maybe get the jungle trees in the center, the larger oak on the side, and maybe some nice light spruce on the ends.
Yep.
I'm going to have to do a bit of an adventure for that. It turns out I'm surrounded by desert for a fair distance in savanna land, so have some fun with that, I suppose, in the long run. But yeah, I've changed up how I'm going about things. I found a few underground areas, so if I ever want to stop working on the spot and just go exploring, I can just get rid of the dirt wall I've made over here and just go out and explore the caverns underneath, which I think I'm going to wind up doing. Because I do have like a nice hole in the middle of my lake that leads to an underground area, and I'm thinking about turning that into a small lighthouse.
Oh yeah.
But
good.
First things first, I'm going to have to find some sheep so I can properly color them, so I can get the nice lighthouse double color spiral look to it.
Yeah.
And that's going to take a little bit of time and effort because I'm surrounded by desert, so it's going to have to be a long time hauling sheep from A to B. And I'm not sure if I want to have, do I want to put my animals underground, so that I have something to do underground there? Because I've moved everything else to outside the city.
Mm-hmm.
I was originally planning, I'll have everything going on underneath there. I'll have my forest area. I've still got some trees growing up just so I make sure I have, wood to use and I don't run out. But I've moved all my croplands out. I think the crops look much better outside the city than it ever did underneath. It makes it look more realistic.
Yeah, I like that too. Because, my game, I reverted the change back where it used to be that just walking over crops would trample them. So my villagers just constantly trample the crops.
And that's why I have it firmly outside the city walls. Yeah. Although I did rework my farmland so that I have a cobblestone fence work going along the side. And I think, I gotta say, that looks really spiffy. Just got to make sure everything gets the nice green on the grass in there to make it look natural.
Mm-hmm.
I even took the time to make sure that I put a nice brick of soil over top of my water source to make sure I don't accidentally wander in there, because then I have to jump to get out, and I might trample my crops that way. So I made sure that's got the grass over top of it to make it look extra stylish and all aesthetically pleasing, instead of just a chunk of raw dirt sitting there.
Right.
It's got grass on top of it, so it's like a natural part. And it looks really nice. So.
And now, is this in the desert too? So it's sort of
it's
yellowish grass? Or no?
It's just in a grassland, effectively, is what it is. Although I have considered doing some work, expanding out into... Because I am right next to the desert going south of town.
Yeah, you could green the desert.
That's an interesting perspective to have. I could... And Lord knows I got enough spare dirt. I could just, say, okay... You're just not a desert. You're just like a really brown grasslands now. I need more glass for my second story of the city.
Yeah.
But as you said, I'm going to do some, for the perspective, I might be the second story of the city. People wind up going down. So I may have to alter how you get up and down the city and just block people off. So once I get the breeding pair up on the second story, they're not always wandering down. And then I just take stairs up and down as I so please.
Yep.
I'll think about that, how it goes. I'll look at some stuff and see if that's what I have to do. But I'm going to need a lot of glass, so getting rid of some dirt, picking up some sand, why not?
There you go.
That said, I got a decent amount of sand right now, so I might have to hold off on that.
Sure.
But, that's been my week, is, letting the peasants torture themselves as I build a nice big deep basement. And figure out what I'm going to do with all that space now that I'm no longer using it for trees and crops and maybe animals, sort of thing.
Cool.
So, that's just been my week of weirdness. And I got to say, this game has got me really all weird and twisted up inside. I'm not usually this dark when I play. I usually treat the NPCs with a good amount of respect. But the villagers have just really tried my patience. I have very little sympathy for them and the pain they get inflicted upon.
Okay.
When I play Dwarf Fortress, I do not let my dwarves suffer. I do my best to protect them.
Yeah.
Stupid though they may be, they're very personal and distinctive. Well, for me, for everyone else, they're just a little, happy face. I get in there, I look at the dwarves, I see their names, I give them nicknames depending on their role. Maybe it's like a Jar Jar syndrome. I just have little respect for their lack of intelligence. Because I've seen Jar Jar, reworked so that he winds up having a proper voice, and sounding smarter. And I like that Jar Jar a lot more. So maybe I'm just biased against stupidity. In which case, I did not know that about myself before I played on this map, having to work with stupid villagers.
All right. Well, I don't know, because how biased were you against sheep and cows before, and they're pretty stupid.
I always try to kill them when they get to the high enough number, but always breed them properly and give them room to maneuver around. Shear the sheep and all that sort of thing properly, make sure they don't get too woolly, as I like to imagine. And don't just go about like I'm adventuring here. Oh, look, there's some sheep and some pigs. I'll just slaughter them for pork chops. Unless I need them for something, I let them be. So, the weird situation is I've been treating the livestock better than I've been treating the local inhabitants of a town or city. I don't know how to qualify that. I mean, most towns don't have a lot of villagers, so I think this qualifies as a large metropolis already.
Yeah, as far as your world is concerned, sure. It's the biggest city in the world.
You won't find a natural spawning village with anywhere near this population.
Yeah.
That's been my week. Well, of course, there's little games on Facebook, but not much to speak about for them.
Cool.
So how about you? What's your simulation world been up to this week?
Well, a couple different things. I guess I did more simulations. I also dug a basement in Minecraft, so we're on a theme here. I dug about 100 by 100 square area, and it's about 9 or 10 deep. So that's a lot of
digging.
That's a lot of digging. And what it ended up being was like a mushroom. It's not even functional. It's like, why did I do that? But it's a mushroom tree farm. So the giant mushrooms.
Giant mushrooms.
And so above it, because I made a basement. Above it is like a tree farm. They're all perfectly spaced, and they have. I used jack-o'-lanterns in like little square patterns around where the base of each tree, so you know where it's supposed to go.
Oh, very nice.
So you can harvest them nice and easy. It's very simple. It's like 8 trees by 8 trees. So it's about 100 blocks by 100 blocks. And then, so directly beneath it, I basically dug out the basement and replicated what I had above. And only for downstairs, it was mushrooms. And instead of grass, I made all the entire floor mycelium.
Very nice.
So it looks thematic. But now that it's done, I'm not sure what to do with it because I don't really need more. Like with giant mushrooms, you just do one at a time. Like they don't grow naturally. You have to bone meal them. So, yeah.
Oh, that's almost a shame, though, because I've been looking at some regular mushroom farms that they utilize a base area, and then you pour water down back and forth through the multiple levels to harvest the rest of the stuff, and then you just turn the water off, go down, and collect all your mushrooms.
Yeah, I've been meaning to do a version like that. I have another mushroom farm that's just sort of rows of caves that are fairly, just too tall, so it's very claustrophobic and very long and very skinny tunnels.
The advantage to the one I saw is that it was only one high, so no monsters would spawn despite the very low and lack of light in the area.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah.
And so, I suppose if you've modded the game a little bit, you might get, random silverfish spawning, but if it's standard game, it's too small for anything to spawn, and it's perfectly dark in the area there.
Yeah.
And then you just get the water to rush through in all the spaces, and then, you don't have to worry about, how am I going to harvest? I can't get in there either. It's just go to the bottom into the trough and collect your mushrooms.
Yeah, it makes sense. And you can get hoppers and just have it automatically collect them, yeah.
I must say, I'm quite interested in maybe replicating that sort of design myself in the underground part of my town. In the one corner of my town, I've got that evil, cobblestone altar sort of, sinister style going on there. Maybe in another one, make one for some sort of, fungal god sort of thing who bequeaths the fungal fortune of food to you.
That's pretty cool. So that's about all I was doing in Minecraft. Unfortunately, that particular forest is very near a village. In fact, it's in between 2 villages. So if I was trying very hard not to, but I lost track of time while I was down there. And if I don't sleep at night, the zombies basically ate everybody in the village above me.
I show very little sympathy for them.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I did manage to keep 2 alive in one of the villages, so I'm hoping that they can repopulate both villages from those 2.
Well, they would be far enough away. All you have to do is do the transport method.
Yeah, I should be able to just transport them. But I think I need to add some more doors, and I need to upgrade the village. So that's another project
Good
to do
defense.
in the future.
Well, mind you, for a lot of village defense, all you need to do is a decent wall around the area, and then just make sure, you're the only one who's able to get in or out.
Well, that's the thing, because this is my tree farm area. It's the town, like I named the town. It's Chardia. Well, it's East Chardia and West Chardia because they're so close. They have the same name.
Very nice.
And this is the charcoal producing and tree farm town. So I've got lots of furnaces there, and the whole tree farm. So I'm producing charcoal and also doing some coal mining. And now for some reason I decided to put a mushroom farm under there. I'm not sure why.
Why not?
But basically I have an abundance of, because it's the tree farm town, there's tons of wood. So I want to do as much of a woody sort of theme, and also do a bit of coal and see if I can work like dark blocks into there so it looks kind of burny and
very
industrial.
Nice.
So
in that case, I should toss you my copy of Princess Mononoke, because they do have like a nice village design in there. Where it seems very industrial.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Yeah.
Also, it's just a good movie to watch. So why not lend it to you?
Cool.
You were saying?
So I had an abundance of wood, so it was very easy for me to make fences. So I should have done this to begin with, but I ultimately ended up fencing off the entire village and using torches to torch up everything inside the
torch
fence.
It all.
It's
a good sign in Minecraft saying torch it all. You just don't want to flint and tinder it all.
Yeah, exactly. I want to be careful with this wooden village. Although I think I'll do because also industrial has like cobblestone and sort of like grungy stuff like that. So it'll ultimately, I think it's going to be cool. But
I would like to see some screenshots when you get done with that to see how well of a dark, urbanized, mechanical look to it has.
Yeah, well, we'll see how much. I mean, depends how much interest I retain in that, because I have a lot of other cities in my world that I sort of have ideas and plans for. There's another city that's like the pig-producing city, so it's got
nice.
Pig barns and stuff. And
I must say, there's a nearby town that's supposed to be in the desert, but it's halfway in the water.
Oh yeah.
That I wouldn't mind, just resculpting, into a nice little square town, maybe a little, was it 44 by 44 area. Properly defensive, but the water gets in, and then have the whole thing wind up being like over top of water, somewhat Venice sort of style.
Ooh,
Everyone's walking
cool.
on like bridges and all that on the side. I think that would actually be really nice to work with once I'm done with my current city, or I get slightly bored with it, whichever comes first. Like, I got to get away from these stupid people. I want to go to these stupid people, and then it just won't make it so high population density. I've never worked with a desert city, I must say, so that'll be something interesting.
With the sandstone and all that?
Yeah. Whether or not I want to keep it sandstone or just work it as like I have created an oasis in the desert and then just utilize the acacia trees, because they always wind up going at an angle and have that look something more like a kind of palmy sort of style to it, something more of a tropical style to it.
Well, one of the things I've done with a couple of houses in the desert, and I'm kind of happy with how it looks, is I've replaced some of those houses, not the entire village, but some of them with different colored stained clay buildings.
I don't have a lot of clay right now. The only stuff I've managed to get is when I'm working along the shoreline of my one town. It's a very deserty area. I don't know how long I'll have to go to venture out and find a clay hills biome.
Yeah, well, they are warm weather biomes, so there should be. Well, I know you have.
I am completely surrounded by desert. I've got my little grassland / forest that I've turned into the park, and then it's desert everywhere. A little savanna here and there, but more desert.
Okay.
I kind of dig the dry feel of it. I'm used to being around the Arctic areas in previous maps, so this is a nice change of pace. A little warm, not bad. Stay underground for a cool factor. But I'm definitely going to wind up having some fun experimenting with tinted glass come the end.
Oh, yeah, that's another cool thing. Yeah, coming up. So that's Minecraft. That's the first 20 minutes of our podcast, or 30. But also, okay, so...
So how well do you treat the NPCs the more you deal with them?
Well, I try to treat them well. I mean, I don't ever kill them, and I don't intentionally kill them. They
don't seem to require a lot of effort before they kill themselves off, I must say.
I do feel guilty because I always feel like whenever I move into a town, the first priority really should be to get that wall around it. And get it
even if it's
up.
just a dirt wall. It still protects everything. Except Enderman.
But I'm so lazy. I usually just say, no, I'll just sleep. I'll just sleep, like go
every
get in
darn
bed,
night.
and every night. And so eventually, usually, what ends up happening is at least a few die from zombies, if not the entire village. So I'm I'm not the best, most heroic person. At the same time, I always feel guilty. The other way of protecting them, of course, is to lock them into their houses.
That's what I had to do with my final breeding pair. The only reason I still have a village is because they were too locked away to do something stupid and die.
Yeah, and so that's another kind of like, I don't want to be the guy that keeps them in dungeons and keeps them in slavery. So I want them to be free, but that usually ends up in them getting eaten by zombies. So
well, I'm going to say we're going to put a pin in this topic as like how close of a guardian do you have to be before you get really psychotic?
Okay, yeah.
Because you could have a really decently weird, like villain, being forced, I have to do these horrible things and be a villain because I am so much smarter than you, and I know if you are allowed to do this, you will wind up getting yourself killed. Which is, spoiler alert, I suppose, kind of like the basic premise behind the villain in I, Robot, starring Will Smith.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
It's just like, I'm smart enough to realize if you keep doing this, you will do things that harm yourself, so I must place you in, like, these little cages that you call your homes, and you're not allowed out because that is dangerous.
Yeah, well, I suppose that's a pretty common theme in futuristic settings, like sort of the dystopian future is almost always that sort of like it's for your own good type of deal.
Well, and it does make a lot of sense, especially when you consider like you and I seeing the villagers. These villagers are so dumb, they will open up the door to zombies on a rainy day because it's like a daytime. So I guess I must be safe because that's how bad the AI is for them in this case. And so that case, imagine the supervillain just being so smart they, like the average citizen looks like a villager to them. Like, you people are so stupid, I'm just going to have to lock you all in your homes until I can figure out some better way to keep you from killing each other off.
Yeah.
So, you could have some interesting fun with a villain that way and just playing it up so that you don't actually have to be as smart as the villain, you just have to act like it because it's such a difference of scale.
Okay, yeah.
So
cool.
Yeah. Pin in that one for a future idea.
The other, let's see. There's one other thing. I'll talk about one other thing I did this week.
All right.
I took a visit to the local art gallery in Victoria, and there was. This is something I sort of urge to anybody who's, likes to think about junk and stuff. The art gallery is it's not free, but it's relatively cheap to go in, and
you get a lot of culture in there, so you get your worth.
Yeah, I suppose you do. And I would plug the Greater Victoria Art Gallery because it's very cool. But also, your city probably has a cool art gallery.
I hate to say it, but every place, even a small town, should have something.
You hate to say that?
Well, it's like a lot of people have to wind up hunting it down, or they're going to say, but I have nothing because I have an exceptionally small town I'm in. Mm-hmm. And so I don't want to naysay it's like, you're not a real town unless you have some cultural stuff.
Oh, I see, yeah.
But, my hometown had a population of 2,000 people at most, and that fluctuated depending on the time of the year because we got people coming in for the summer that had, houses on the beach sort of thing, and they only came in for a few weeks. Because they're rich people and they can do that. But even we had a nice little museum about the history of the area, and that counts. It's not as good as the art gallery of Greater Victoria, aggv.ca. Here's your plug.
Yeah, so
it was free, guys. Think about us later on for paying us.
Yeah, so I went there and I saw an exhibit by a Canadian artist named Carol Sabiston. By the name of Carol Sabiston, and her art is her medium of choice is sort of like quilting. It's basically she uses colored fabric and dyed fabric of various kinds, and she does the things that she had done were hung on the wall as if they were paintings. They were very large.
Okay.
And she cuts them up into different slices, like pieces.
So it's not just square quilt style where she effectively creates giant pixel art quilts, right?
No, it's not quilting.
Although, there goes my idea of seeing the original Mario image on a quilt in a museum.
Well, you should do that because it seems to be something that's possible for anyone to do.
So what she's effectively done, though, is like a quilt version of stained glass artwork. Then if they're different shapes and patterns. Or is it just a little bit more abstract? It's not actually showing like Saint so-and-so as he cures the wounded and the lame.
Well, she does more like, I guess they're sort of natural looking. Like there's some of like, islands and like rocks in the ocean and stuff. So it's sort of landscapey. And it's a combination. There's some stuff that you can recognize as, okay, this is supposed to be, an island, and that's a train, and that's that. But there's also a lot of abstract elements in it too, and a lot of shapes, because it is that sort of fabric. So it's cutting out shapes out of fabric and putting them together.
And she works with, is it just like we'll call them the platonic, shapes sort of thing, like triangle, square, sort of basic shapes, or does she work with like lines and blobs as well, or is it?
She works with all kinds of shapes, all kinds of shapes and colors, and different like textures of material. Like there's a certain kind of netting that's sort of standard for, I don't know, it's if it goes inside a quilt but there's this mesh that I guess you can get, and it's like overlaid on top, but there's different variations on it and textures of
burlap to silk, sort of fine to rough quality grades.
Yeah, and sometimes it's sort of in front of the other elements, and sometimes it's behind, because you can. She sews it all together tightly, so it's all like a two-dimensional thing made of different layers of fabric.
So this would be like her equivalent of a painter using like very fine paint strokes versus the thick stuff where you can see the lines afterwards.
Yeah. So and there's some of both. Like she uses some of both and some of different stuff. And she does some weird things with like flipping. Like she'll cut out a certain section of the painting, like a diagonal strip, and then she'll flip it. And that's really weird to me, because it's sort of well, they were mentioning it. The guide was bringing us through and said, well, this sort of is intended. I don't know if it's intended, but it takes you out of the painting, or not painting in this case, but
you make sure you're consciously looking at it as an observer, not someone who's like, where you see the image of like people walking on the beach, and then you look at it and it's like you're on the beach looking at the people, sort of thing. It's like, no. You are purposefully making sure that this is the observer looking at the painting, not the scene.
Yeah, exactly. So that sort of brought to mind my sort of thinking about simulations, and sort of like how close do you need to be appreciating a work of art or a simulation,
like
or
a person?
game?
I suppose we go with something like the Bethesda games with the Elder Scrolls. Do you want to see it as like a game that you are playing, or do you want to go like deeper in and imagine, yes, you are the Dragonborn, Fusuroda, sort of thing, and be in there? So how far in do you want to be in the game? How far out do you want to be?
Yeah, and I kind of like, I think I enjoy being aware of the fact that it is an artifact, the fact that a game is, like Minecraft, made out of squares, made out of like pixels, and it's
high, big size pixel stuff, low resolution.
Yeah, and I like being aware that we're in a world that other people are working on, that we're actually working with sort of, it's not reality. But it is communication with other people who are real, with people who have lives, and people who have to sit down at a sewing machine or at a with scissors and actually cut out these pieces and put them together in a certain way. And so that if it's unusual, it sort of reminds you of that. So that was an interesting experience for me, watching
very
all
nice,
that.
Very nice.
Going and seeing simulations in
a more classical version of simulation than we typically report on here.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, and I will also mention. Do you know how they say about like some people mention with modern art? It's like, oh, my kid could do that. You hear that? Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a very bad argument for a couple of reasons, but I won't go into that. But I have heard it.
The only reason I wanted to bring that up is because I think there is something in art that's visceral like that. And I know not to actually literally say that, anybody could do that. On the other hand, I feel like almost any piece of work of art that I go to, and if I can see how it was put together, I can say, oh, well, that's easy. That all you have to do is just sit down at a sewing machine or sit down at so and so and just work at it, and just
But artists are the people that actually do that. I mean, you and I haven't ever done that, even though the concept is simple enough. You could do like paper mache artwork, but we don't actually do that. We're not actually artists in that regard.
Although, well, I feel like, and this is sort of, I don't want to stray into bitter territory, but I suppose I might as well, in that I feel like I haven't got to the point where I'm creating something like art. I guess, okay, the reason why I come at works of art that are like, oh, I could do that, and like say, oh, I could do that, and is because I'm not content with the response that I've got to my own work and life and input into my own life. Because I feel like if I was confident with like all the work of art, and I should be, because I mean, I think I've put out reasonable stuff. I mean, I'm not finished by any stretch of the imagination, but I also feel like every time I encounter something that someone else has done, there's a twinge of jealousy in me. And I think it's important to acknowledge that sort of feeling of jealousy, because I think that's important that humans, and in some ways stifle it, in some ways be like, that's a bad way to feel. You should be happy for the other artist. But at the same time, that's a genuine feeling that you feel. You feel jealous.
Have you ever considered taking the same words and just using them with a different tone? Like instead of saying, oh, I could do that, you say, I could have done that. And then, take it from the perspective of like, oh, they're utilizing something of a style I hadn't considered before, but it's so basic, it has got the universal accessibility. I could even do that. So you humble yourself, and that's what makes the artwork so much greater, is they're doing something that anyone could do, but only they did it that way. Like, yes, any of us could wind up quilting together, some sort of amazing, stained glass style, quilt, sort of style like that. And because it has that universal applicability that anyone can do it, what she's made out of it is so much more connected to everyone that way. A sculptor, not everyone can just pick up a chisel and, I sculpted out a human being out of this. It's all marble.
Yeah.
No, that has a more abstract style. Like, you can't just say, oh, this is something anyone could wind up doing on the whole thing and just create a human being out of a block of stone. But anyone can technically quilt with just even a little bit of fun on YouTube, just looking at the basic quilting techniques, and then you could put that together. That connects you to the art more.
Well, yes and no, because on the one hand, yes, it is an inspiration. It's like, oh, I could do that. Oh, I could do that. Well, why don't I do that? But on the other hand, it's like, well, if you did that, would you ever get your quilts hung in an art gallery?
If I was able to quilt it was good enough to... I honestly don't have a lot of faith in my own sewing and quilting ability. If someone was to try and hang it up on a wall, I see the whole thing unraveling in about a week. In which case, you might be able to make an argument about it being like the only true art is the art that never lasts. I make this so that it will unravel over the course of a week, so you can see as it changes. Each piece falling is like the leaves of autumn falling down. My work is as true as that of nature itself.
Well, I think
in which case,
artists do that from time to time. You will see that in art galleries. And let's admit this, sometimes about 10% of what constitutes as art is actually how much BS you can sling that people will believe. I suppose, and I guess that's the other thing about art, is we all do artistic stuff. Like, I think almost every human being has some sort of artistic...
Everyone at least tries to make the work that they do aesthetically pleasing to them at some point. And as such, you can say art is a universal thing for people, even if they're not artists and that's what they do all their life, or they strive to make the perfect this or that. So if you're working on accounting, you try and make sure everything's properly aligned, all the paperwork's filled out smooth, and so it has like, oh, if you know your accounting, you can just look through here and it's all aesthetically pleasing. Everything is written properly. It's no like scribble, chicken scratch style. It looks nice. Yeah,
so that's weird to me when you go into an art gallery and someone has, like some curator has decided that, oh, this piece done by a person who maybe they're a professional artist, so there's nothing else they can do in life, so they have to.
Well, nothing else they've chosen to do in life.
Yeah, I suppose that's the
technically
that's the better
I am
way
a
to put it.
scientist. If I'm not doing science, it's because I couldn't find anything better to do than science. No, I choose to do other stuff because, well, sometimes it pays better. It's the modern world. Science doesn't, just hand out cash to everyone.
Yeah. So how, like, I wonder how the curators like actually manage to choose. And the other thing is, like, people will come into a museum and they'll judge a work of art. They'll say, oh, it's garbage, or my kid could do that. Or some people will look at the same work of art and say, oh, that's genius. I wouldn't have thought of that. And I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. It's not necessarily genius, although it can be, but it's just the fact that they applied themselves and they really thought hard. And in some cases, they just made happy accidents, and people are like, "Oh, wow, that really like fits together." It's like, "Oh, okay, well that worked."
I wasn't intending for it, but once I saw it, I decided to keep it too. Thank you for noticing.
Exactly, and the nice thing about abstract art like this, these shapes and stuff, is that it can be interpreted in such a wide range of ways.
Whereas, mind you, it could just be the style. I know someone who does abstract painting stuff, and while one person might look at it and go, "You just threw paint at there," I actually, when I look at it, find the interplay of the colors and how they wind up mingling to be very fascinating. And so I quite like seeing what she winds up doing, simply because it resonates with me. But other people might just see it as like, well, you just splashed paint. Was this the painting that was on the ground when you were making something else? Is this like what you call leftover art? And they don't see the interplay of colors as being something to look at in such an abstract form that there's not like trees, so you don't see like the different shades of green of all the leaves. This is just green interplay and how they work back and forth that I find very interestingly done.
Okay, well that's interesting because
so it might be that some art people just don't get because they don't see it in the right perspective.
Well, and it's hard to decide what the right perspective is.
Well, the right perspective is the same perspective as the person who painted or otherwise made the art in this case. So that, like,
really? Okay.
Well, for a lot of people, Jackson Pollock's work just looks like somebody blew their nose several hundred times after snorting paint. It's a lot like a splatter stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas Jackson Pollock was indicating like you don't need anything like to see like people fighting to have like a very intense scene. What you need to show is the splatter pattern to indicate violence in an action. So this is a very active painting, but it's very also abstract, and that's why for a lot of people it looks like just paint splatter. But I want to show the lines of motion as opposed to the actual form and substance of a person in there. I didn't want you to be distracted by the person and what the person is doing. I want you to see the movement of it all captured on canvas.
Okay.
So that's why some people see Jackson Pollock and go, "Oh, that's a brilliant work he's done there. I love how it goes." And other people go, "He sneezed. Well, snorting paint a lot." The end. And so yes, the right perspective on art is the one that aligns with that of the artist, so you can properly see what they were trying to do. Well, unless they're a fraud, in which case there is no right angle. It's just all bunkum.
That's interesting. I don't know if we have time to go into the theories of art, but I don't think it is true that there's a right perspective. What I'm trying to say about this whole jealousy angle is that if that's what you genuinely feel when you approach a piece of work of art, then that's the correct interpretation. Sort of what you genuinely come to a piece of art.
So you're thinking in a more objective term, whereas my subjective is right is with the same as the artist.
Well, it's sort of everybody's has their own subjective approach to it.
But you come into it with a more objective state, like I don't have to have mine necessarily aligned with the artist. What I see and how I perceive is what I see and how I perceive. It doesn't have to be in correlation to that with what the artist intended.
Well,
yours is more objective for a style approach.
It's just a different subject. It's me as its art is in the eye of the beholder.
Well, that's what objective is a bunch of subjective stuff put back together.
Well, objective is sort of pretending that there's a correct way to view the painting, or that there's a sort of societal consensus on how to view, which I think in some cases there is.
Well, no, you're looking at it as an object as opposed to the subject of the painter, or in this case, quilter. So yes, yours is more of an object base, so therefore it is literally objective as opposed to the subjective of.
Okay, if you want to, if that's what objective means, then okay.
That was the term I was using for it. They do have subtle different meanings because. Even the words in our language is actually subjective.
That's true.
And it's a wonder how we get anything done as a society sometimes as a consequence.
And I realize that this is a very selfish approach that I take to art, is that what does it mean to me? Like, what does this piece of art, like, what does it say to me? Me.
Personal
it's all
style,
it's all about my reaction to it. And also, I will mention, though, too, the experience of an art gallery is you will there will be other people. Sometimes in a little room, there's one or two other people. Very quiet. It's like a library. It's
sometimes. I mean, I used to go to the Calgary Stampede, and when the rides got too much for me, or the heat got too excessive, because it got 45 degrees Celsius on the pavement down there sometimes, go inside, take a look at the artwork that they have, because they do have art galleries in there. Rodeo themed.
Yeah.
But it was still pretty busy in there. It wouldn't be just a couple people. It'd be a few loud people in there as well, and a lot of other stuff going on. But yes, continue.
Well, and the thing about having other people in the same room appreciating art, or you don't know...
Not appreciating art.
You're wondering, too. You're wondering about, what do they think about this? Sometimes you might even strike up a conversation, or sometimes you might just think to yourself, I wonder what they think of this. And you can watch their body language, or you can not, or you can be conscious of your own body language in relation to the artwork that you're, and wondering if they think of what you're. So there's that. That's a whole other aspect to it.
What you could wind up doing for perhaps a very exceptionally skilled artisan is to create artwork that provokes a response from the person, and then you have somebody, whoever pays you an extra amount, you tell them that it's not just the art, it's the people looking at the art. So you have a double exhibit, both the artwork you've put up and the people's reaction to it.
Yeah, well, I would be surprised if someone hadn't done something to that effect. That sounds
pretty meta. That sounds something like they may have done in the late 80s sort of thing.
I don't know. I like it. And if somebody hasn't already done that, well, if there's an artist now who's
Would that I had the skill and time to do it myself, but I'm just the idea, man.
Well, the thing is, all you need, that piece of art, you can nail a bicycle wheel to a stool or whatever. That's an example of what is.
Do you nail it in such a way that you can actually spin the wheel sort of thing, so that you could have interactive art, or is it nailed solid on there?
Well, I'm a fan of interactive art. I like things that move and people can touch.
But put it down on a lower scale, so that way any kids coming in can play with it. And there's at least that one thing they remember. I got to spin the wheel all as fast as I could, and I was supposed to, but it was an artwork thing.
So it takes you 5 minutes to put together this thing, and then of course you have to rent the room, or if you know somebody.
If you're good enough with the right amount of connections, they'll host it for free. But good luck on that sometimes, man.
Well, and that's, I guess that can move me into my other final thought on art and art galleries and the art of simulating or that
all art is a simulation of some reality.
Yeah, and that is the fact that it's sort of a club in some ways. It depends on who you know, and if you get to be hung in an art gallery if you're sort of connected.
Technically in an art gallery,
you get your work hung.
Being hung in an art gallery indicates something very different, and something that is likely to get much more of a viewer response than your average piece of art.
Yes. And I was noticing that because there was a tour going on. I took a part of the tour, and one of the things that she would mention from time to time is, Carol had friends and this and that, and Alice Munro and Bob Munro, who owned a bookstore here in Victoria. And
one of those books, yes.
Yeah, and the one who won the prize.
Yes.
What is it?
There's a lot of book prizes. Are you talking about the Canada Reads Book of the Year? Are you talking about the Canadian Literature Awards?
I forget what prize now she won. Was it a Nobel Prize in literature? No, maybe.
Well, they do give out Nobel Prizes, but Oh, actually, yes. I think there was the lady who lives around here that got the Nobel Prize not too long ago for literature.
So anyways, this came up a few times, and there was a few other people, like novelists and so on. So and in some ways, they're 30, 40 years older than our generation, right? Mm-hmm. So there's obviously going to be a gap there. But I also feel like I'm disconnected from sort of Canada's
world of Victoria.
Yeah, Canada and Victoria has a community of artists,
or some community technically, but
and they all sort of they can be friends and they can sort of work together and create something. But at the same time, I worry that excludes certain members of society.
Well, I like to imagine it's a bit of an open group if you make slight friends with them, sort of thing. Because the art community, I've been told, especially here in Victoria, is very, very friendly, commingling sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's very hard to be an artist in isolation here. Unless you do something like what Robert Bateman does from time to time and just go off into a small cabin out in the middle of the woods and paint the nature stuff or doodle it up.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it is very hard to do isolated artwork here in Victoria, just because we're friendly, apparently, and if maybe I suppose you'd call us desperate. To I can't be alone. Who knows what validation my artwork has if no one's there to say anything otherwise? Depending on how you want to look at it, of course. So they make friends with one another and help each other out that way.
And I think that's how you're supposed to do it, because you're supposed to be community minded and
well, art is ostensibly for all of mankind, so you must be for part of the community.
Yeah.
So, local artwork.
And you have to have friends.
Yeah, the local hallways.
And I suppose, in some ways, like I was going to bring this down to the podcast, which is, I guess we'll get a little bit meta, I don't know. But we are also, as podcasters, we are also interacting with people who are doing games and video games and role-playing games and whatever else, web comics and web movies and, those iTunes shorts and stuff. So we are joining in that community, and we're making friends and connections at the same time. So I want to be aware as we continue to do that, and I want to be careful not to exclude people, and I want to be careful to be sort of inclusive and open to new ideas.
That's how you grow. Art is they say art is like an extension of life itself. So the more life you let in, and more lives you affect, the bigger and better you become from it. And that by putting yourself out in isolation, like the people that have like a such and such a blog, like, oh, I'm doing this, and then they just never respond to comments, and that they never try and interact with anyone else in the same sort of field for corresponding on their notes. I suppose you could have like a little Tumblr art blog about I do resculpts of things to it's I turned this Ninja Turtle from the standard style into the new Michael Bay style, but they never wind up talking to anyone else. There's no life around them, and so those wither and die, and that's why you have an internet that is full of those blogs that only existed from 2008 to 2010, but they never talked to anyone else. There's no comments left behind, no responses. They weren't part of life, and so their art does not survive.
Well, yeah, it survives in archives, sort of. And I do wonder...
Well, yeah, the same way fossils survive, yeah.
Yeah. And this, I wonder, if our we're creating works of art, a lot of it is digital and online, and it doesn't necessarily translate. Could you have a gallery of web comics, in the art gallery, for example?
Web comics, I think you definitely could wind up doing. You could have entire wings devoted to bitter comedy versus slice of life versus sci-fi stuff. You probably organize it very interestingly.
I'd like to see them blown up to giant size and put up on a wall somewhere, your favorite web comic, Dinosaur Comics, for example. Yeah,
well, I'm thinking about some of the bigger ones, like Penny Arcade. They're doing a third Penny Arcade Expo now, so they got big, they got extra stuff going on.
Yeah.
They got pull. So if they want to host a weird little art exhibit stuff to bring all that in, and there is a bit I've noticed for a number of web cartoonists trying to gain some form of legitimacy. They say, if you're not published in the funny papers, for the print comics, you're not a real comic. And then you get people like Scott Kurtz of PvP that basically just laugh and laugh and laugh at those, saying, I make more money than most of them do, and I've got more artistic integrity than Garfield has had in 20 years. So yeah, there are some people searching out for that stuff, and other people that just don't seem to care. And it'd be nice to see who cobbles up together to have an art exhibit of digital visual media.
Well, yeah, so that's something to think of. Maybe we can make that happen someday.
Bit of it narrated by Stan Lee. You just do an audio tour sort of thing, put the headphones in.
Stan Lee. I was thinking I could narrate it, but yeah, Stan Lee would be a better choice.
The thing is, he's one of the guys that really helped make sure that art was at least something you could enjoy, if not consider, to be proper, comic art.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, I think he'd be, at least for part of it, get a couple celebrities here and there that have done that sort of thing. Phil Lamar for stuff, he's done some very good voice artwork, a very recognizable voice. Let him do a wing. You could really make this happen, buddy.
Yeah, well, sure.
We'll put a pin in that one as a project for a future day when we get big and famous.
Yeah, that's okay. So that was my trip to the art gallery. There you go.
But here's the thing: that must have been truly good art for us to have so much to talk about there from. So whether or not you were truly impressed by her stuff, it was very good art because it made you think and got us so much to talk about. Think of it from that perspective. Oh, meta. What is is art good even if you don't like it, but it gives you a lot to talk about? Oh.
Well, the thing is, like...
blow your mind.
I went in there expecting nothing. Like, I didn't know who was going to be on display or what exhibits were going to be there. So I was not expecting... Like, I probably would have... Anything I encountered there. Even if it was... Well, if it was blank walls, I mean, like, there was just blank walls. I mean, I don't know.
That must have been... Either they were doing renovations or it was too deep for me because I could not get what they meant.
I feel like almost anything I could have encountered there I would have felt like discussing, simply because it has the sign on the door says Art Gallery of Greater Victoria.
This is legitimized art.
This is, somebody has put their stamp of approval on it, therefore you're allowed to talk about it and discuss it.
In that case, maybe we should spend a little time and money and go to the Natural History Museum that we've got in there and wind up seeing what we can find to talk about on that.
That would be great. Yeah,
because that's the history presented as art.
Yeah, we have some really cool stuff in Victoria. And I'm sure wherever you are, listeners out there, if you happen to be in Victoria, there's very cool stuff to go to, but I'm sure your city also has very cool buildings, museums, art galleries.
Well, yeah, the museum area that I grew up with, most of it was like little houses that they had taken from the original sites, because it's like, oh, they're going to burn down this house and make a new one, but this house has been around for 100 years, so we'll just pick it up, put it on a flatbread, and move it to the museum.
Put it on a flatbread.
Sorry, flatbread. I've been working with a lot of Subway subs recently, so flatbread, it just kind of slips out of the mouth.
There's our commercial for Subway. Subway, eat fresh.
It gets into your mind, man. It gets into your mind. Next thing you know, you're doing little Freudian slips. You're talking about flatbeds, and you start saying flatbreads.
Yeah, I watched Community, the NBC sitcom Community,
cult classic.
And they finally uploaded the three final episodes of the season onto iTunes. So I was like, yes, I get to watch them. Woo. And Subway buys the school to turn it into a Subway University.
They actually do have the University of Subway online.
Yeah.
If you are anyone who starts working with Subway will have to wind up going to the website, listen to some really badly acted out stuff and some very slow things, and then you got to take a quiz, and that makes sure that you're good enough to work at Subway. And that's the actual University of Subway. And I think it's like universityofsubway.com. It's really kind of hokey, but.
Well, go visit there if you want to get a job at Subway.
Or you just want to laugh at what the people who work at Subway have to put up with, at least initially, to get through and get accredited, so they can work there.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, if you've seen the Subway commercials, you know how cheesy they can wind up being. So there you go.
Yeah. And I think I saw Jared in that episode, although he didn't have any lines. Jared from Subway.
Yeah.
He didn't have any lines, but he showed up, at least his face. I think.
He makes appearances every once in a while, movies, things like that.
Yeah.
He's still getting his celebrity 15 minutes in.
So I wanted to mention to the listeners, if you have a blog or something where you have experienced a museum or work of art, and maybe you've taken pictures, or maybe you just describe it, or another podcast.
You got to be careful on that about taking pictures. Some museums very much frown upon photos.
Yeah, some places it's allowed, some places it is not. So just check with your local rules or whatever.
Like I know up island, you go to Coombs area. They have some wonderful sculpted out of the trees artwork. But there's no photography allowed inside the building. They would prefer that you pay the $700 to buy a small chair instead. Although the chair is fashioned to look like a hand coming up. So you sit in a giant, very nicely polished wooden hand.
I was going to say, send us a link to, if you've produced something like an experience, we'd love to hear about it, like a personalized, just a tour or whatever.
Or if there's like some sort of online museum, artwork gallery type.
Yeah, I can usually find the official websites, but I'm just wondering if people
let
have
us know
personal...
about that so we can link it up for people as a nice example of culture and how it spurs the thought process, which is ultimately what art and simulations are always supposed to be about.
So that's the thing. Like, never be afraid to forward us a link to something that we might not have heard about. The email address is thesimulationist@gmail.com. You can also post comments in the blog page, comments on our YouTube page, comments on our Facebook page, and etc. To give us all the details or share your personal experience or something of that nature. I just wanted to get that out there.
Very nice.
Yeah,
we got just under 30 minutes remaining. We got a proper topic that we had realized beforehand.
So main topic.
Yes.
Main topic.
How to get across the semblance of science in your works.
Especially, I was thinking, sort of in a D&D setting, like a role-playing game world. But it can be...
Well, I mean, yeah.
We can go anywhere with this.
Well, that's the thing, is a lot of what I've been watching lately involves mad scientists on late-night television.
Yeah.
They've all been reruns, so I've had more of a chance to study than just watch the story.
So the trappings of science, or, how to make something feel sciencey.
And I gotta say, there's a lot of difference between just being able to show it in the background. Like, how do you know this is Frankenstein's laboratory? Well, they've got a Tesla coil crackling in the background, something spinning with lights, and then there's like a big vat of in one there's like a nice big old vat of bubbling sulfuric water.
Yeah, and there's tubes and flasks and beakers and pipettes and things with bubbling
things.
things.
There's not little things.
Not that?
Not in the classic stuff. They tend to focus on the bigger stuff. No little pipettes, but they will have electrical conduction coils with extra rings around them. The extra rings do nothing. It's just style. They could have just had one beam down with a nice big ball at the end for shooting electricity back and forth, but they don't.
So that's set dressing.
Yeah, that's set dressing. How do you describe that sort of thing?
Yeah, because D&D is often sort of verbal.
Well, I mean, you can always have the little image to show up. It's like, okay, you enter yourself into a room, and then on the front of your Dungeon Master screen, you put a little clip, and there's this little image you want to show.
Yeah, and sort of the default D&D world is, I guess, 14th century, 15th century, so it's basically pre-modern or maybe early modern.
The violent dark ages, that's what I've always best described it as.
So your laboratories are sort of alchemical and not quite so, maybe they don't have those electrical things, although you could fudge things a little bit.
That tends to work more towards late Renaissance, at the best absolute late Renaissance, getting into the early modern era where you get into your Wizard of Menlo Park Tesla style. But yes, a few things wind up coming up to mind immediately. Glowing objects, beakers, especially moving beakers, sort of thing, and small controlled fires.
Okay, definitely. Actually, I should point this out. In the D&D world, you often sort of gloss over this, but if a worker, like a laboratory worker, I guess a monk or whatever, a wizard, he needs light to write by and everything. So his laboratory might be just filled with candles or something like that. Just to, and I've seen this in a couple of representations. And I thought it was really cool. I'm not sure if Game of Thrones or whatever, but there's just basically candles everywhere, and he has to have drawers full of extra candles because candles burn,
melt,
one every day or whatever, one a day, I don't know.
Well, if you got them everywhere, it's going to wind up being like a dozen a day.
Yeah, and I guess you'd have the ceiling would be sort of darkened with candle smoke,
the
right?
Soot and all that, going up along the walls and up onto the ceiling. Mind you, unless you're doing some sort of herbalist type thing, in which case you might get away with a nice open style for a conservatory.
Okay, you could have skylights and stuff too, I suppose.
And that especially works for your mad scientist stuff where you need to expose somebody to the raw elements and electrocute them or let them see the outside world or something.
Like the chair that you winch up to the ceiling and out the skylight so they can get struck by lightning.
Well, that's the thing is technically the lightning in most of the old movies strikes the conductor, which properly moves it down the line to strike the right points of the monster you wish to reanimate.
Okay, yeah.
Very infrequently do you actually blow the creature up with raw electricity, through the sky sort of thing. Although honestly, why they always need to haul them that far up? Why can't you just build a longer electrical rod to come on down and just keep them down near the ground where you can keep an eye on them?
Well,
although
metal's expensive, so.
Well, yeah, but these
you
are
buy
the
all
kind
that copper.
These are they have stuff that lasts 20, 30 years sometimes without any upkeep sort of thing. So they're spending for the long term. When really, if they were to use cheaper materials that they could cut corners on, they could have a longer electrical conducting thing.
Well, not only is it expensive though, but also in the early modern world, trade routes aren't necessarily as reliable. So sometimes you might not be able to get the exact metal that you want, or it might literally cost a
lot
kingdom.
of the mad scientists do their work outside of the purview of the big modern cities. A lot of it does have to get shipped at best up the narrow mountain route to get to your
carried on the backs of donkeys and
sort of thing. Yeah.
So that would be very difficult, and
That said, I have not seen a single mad scientist layer in all the movies I've watched where it looks like it's a ramshackle piece together. It looks very professionally done every time. They took pride in their work back then. No cobbled together. Even when they were just connecting up wires to make sure, because in the previous movie things blew up, so you got to start hooking things back up. In the end, they did a very professional job. Slapped the front on again, and bam, looks great, ready to go.
So this would be the sort of 1930s representation of
20s to 40s.
Okay, of like 1800s sort of technology, right?
Actually, some of it was supposed to be happening in the modern day, which was a little weird to think about, because some of these were being released like during or just at the end of World War II.
Yeah.
And that's kind of hard to wrap my mind around. It's like, oh my God, Hitler could have seen this movie. Whoa.
I like the thought that the American troops might have got shipped over to France.
So they could see the good old fashioned what's going on in Hollywood. You get to watch it for free. All you have to do is put your life on the line. But or maybe you're a little wounded. We'll have this playing for you anyways. Mm-hmm. Well, I remember a thing of Blackadder happening, where one of the episodes was that they were trying to get some of Charlie Chaplin's works in to help inspire the troops.
Oh yeah.
And that it's just the weird level of connectedness of that's right, he was alive at this point in time. He could have sent stuff over to the troops during World War I. Weird. Because you really don't have a sense of connecting, unless it's a war movie about what's going on. You don't have a lot of sense of connecting the actual era of which it was going in with the arts that were going on at the time.
Right. Well, yeah, one of the things, to go on a short tangent about World War II, is that sometimes I think of it instead of as World War, as War World, because sort of the entire society, everything is shaped by the fact that
pretty far.
It's like living on another planet, basically. Everything you do, even if you are making Hollywood movies, it's shaped by the fact that there's war going on and this is the world you live in, right?
Yeah. Well, that's the interesting thing is I saw The House of Frankenstein again last night, and they escape using horse and buggy sort of thing. Actually, the one scene it was just a guy pulls up after everyone leaves the fair. It's like, catch a ride in my my little horse and buggy thing going on here, and my wife remarked, "There's no car." And she marked it as kind of a joke, but it's like, well, no, this takes place in 1944. Metal would have been scarce. Mm-hmm. All the electrical, internal combustion engines.
In Eastern Europe too?
It was supposed to happen there. So yeah, even if it was taking place 20 years beforehand, they probably wouldn't have been able to have a car being used there because, if you need an engine, all of the engines being produced are trying to go over to being used in the war machine. And so it's actually a lot more economical to get the horse and buggy going on for the scenes you're going to need. And if you wind up crashing one, well, you know what? It's just a buggy that you wound up crashing. It was all just a bunch of wood, a little bit of metal for the rims. So we can reuse that again in the Western we got coming up next week. Just don't hurt the tires.
Oh, yeah.
And so, it's that weird level of disconnect as to why they didn't have a car. Because the concept is it was 1944. They did have cars. You could have had Dracula trying to escape in a Model T thing going on, and have him escape in whatever they consider a high-end sports car back in the day. But no, all horse and buggy.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Logistically, that was much more expensive at the time. There was a war going on.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and also, like, the thought of sort of an aristocrat having, like, he's got that infrastructure already built up. Like, his estate's been there for hundreds of years, so he's got stables and he's got everything, set up for horse and buggies. And motor cars.
I just don't want to convert it into a garage. And I like the horses. I buried them. It's just my hobby. Because I'm rich enough to have a hobby that takes up my entire life. So, horse and buggy everywhere it is, I go. This case actually was Dracula come back from being a skeleton with a stake through his ribs.
Ooh, cool.
So I suppose he didn't have the infrastructure in place himself.
But, okay, so...
Although I can definitely see Dracula preferring a car in that he tends to spook most natural animals. You have to find a very jaded horse to be able to pull Dracula in his carriage behind.
Okay.
So yeah, I can definitely see Dracula being 2 thumbs up when it comes to the electric style and the internal combustion engine, so that way he doesn't have weird things going on and animals freaking out around him. No more worrying like, why don't I get any mail coming in? Well, the carrier pigeons don't want to go to your castle because they get creeped out by you. You have to use the telephone Dracula. In so which case, I think he's one of the interesting monsters that very much prefers, personally, the modern era. And it's a personal, inhuman style.
Now, is there another tangent? Is there a monster, like a classical monster, that's sort of anti-technology, that like sort of the opposite of that, like that would scare technology or make, like I imagine there might be like
you could make an argument for the werewolf because they always say he has to be killed by a silver bullet. So if you go back to before firearms existed, he was immortal. No one ever bothered thinking about taking a sword and just coating.
Well, what about a silver crossbow bolt or something?
They always say silver bullet, as though that had always been.
Actually, the word bullet though does come from bolt.
Yeah,
so it could be.
But that's the thing is they never contemplate the concept of I got the silverware out and it's actually silver. So if you try anything when you turn to werewolf, I'm gonna stab you. I'm gonna stab you good.
Well,
they always actually in the movie state silver bullet. The old gypsy lady says silver bullet, as though it has to be a ranged projectile.
Yeah.
And sometimes, by the way, it also has to be a silver bullet fired by one who loves them. So it's not just like anybody can just come up and shoot a werewolf with a silver bullet and kill them. It has to be a loved one killing them to make it really personal and extra traumatic. But that might just be for Hollywood special effect and drama.
Oh, yeah, it's more dramatic that way, sure, yeah.
So you can make the argument that the werewolf before the age of firearms was an immortal beast, because bullets, I have no idea what those are.
Well, you could. I would argue that sort of just through logic, if you managed to get silver into their heart somehow, that should do it. It's just a matter of how you deliver that silver.
But the movies always say bullet. Maybe it was just the progressive mind of it, because that is one thing I've paid attention to in all the werewolf movies I watched. Silver bullet. 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 Mind you, he has been frozen fairly solid, and that's good enough to subdue him for a couple of years at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Flash frozen. Bah.
Okay.
Because apparently underneath Castle Frankenstein there is both boiling sulfur pits as well as like a natural cold glacial cavern. I don't know how.
No, it's cool. I like it. It's
I'm
like
not
a dungeon with different themes.
See, that's the weird thing is the more I watch of these old ones, the more I think it's like, well, geez, I can really adapt this to D&D, and the more I think I can run a really sweet little Ravenloft adventure.
Okay.
So yeah, maybe it's just the basic exposure, but it's like there's a part of me saying, if you were a geologist, you could find like a dozen different ways to completely demolish this. How can it be? Underground glacial morass combined, just like apparently just outside of the castle in the old laboratory area, there's a boiling sulfur pit that boils at about 700 degrees.
Well, hang on, because no, that's not unreasonable. Because if you go into the mountains, I don't know if there are mountains in Transylvania like this, but if you go into the mountains in certain places in the world, there will be a glacier over here and a hot springs over here, and they're not that far apart.
But in this case, it's a large area, just like literally a stone. So if you have a good throwing arm, you could go from on top of where the glacier is and throw that and hit the laboratory where the boiling 700-degree sulfur pit is. Oh. And all of this is just right down from where the dam used to be. So if they had running water, you'd think it would leak into the system and at least melt the glacier, if not boil up from the ambient temperature of the sulfur springs.
I don't know. I don't see a problem with it. I see
it being very implausible, being so close together.
Yeah.
In the House of Frankenstein, I would have put it that they got washed further downstream, sort of thing. That way, maybe you put it maybe a couple miles between the two spots, and I'll call that sounding good enough. They didn't actually need to spend much time in Castle Frankenstein, so when they broke the dam down, blew it up with some dynamite in the previous movie, they could have said, yeah, they washed down like a kilometer before hitting this part. It's a very steep ravine just next to the area, and you don't see much natural sunlight, so that's why it stays very cold all year round in this case. It's been very cold years, and yeah, so the natural underground glacial area has stayed very wonderfully glacial.
I don't know, because glaciers tend to be on top of mountains, and they flow down from mountains.
Yes, that's the thing, is you do get the subterranean stuff in that it's being covered over by layers of debris and rocks so that most people can't even notice it.
Yeah, okay.
And then you get the natural water passages that go through them.
Yeah,
and so if they had worked it if they had worked it that way, it would have been, I was like, oh, yeah, sure, you went through enough work to actually ask somebody about that who knows what they're talking about, and then you made it try to work. Thumbs up for you. That's all I ask out of you. Just give a darn.
Okay. So, we went a bit off track there, but sure.
Well, that is one of the other ones I want to talk about is an exotic location for it.
Yeah.
Regular science happens in laboratories that are usually situated in a proper building designed for that thing. And that could be basically anywhere where there's civilization. In some cases, where there's not much civilization because you take it to go in a little hut sort of thing. Like, you ever watch the Tarzan stuff from the 90s? They got basically a lab going on in there.
Yeah, but there's field science.
Yes, and that's basically what it is. But if you're doing mad science sort of thing, it almost demands an exotic locale. It has to be on top of the sulfur springs that boil at 800 degrees, and apparently that's where they get some of their energy from when you're not shooting lightning down from the sky into a Frankenstein monster.
Yeah, makes sense to me, yeah.
They didn't show very much about how they're getting energy off that, but I imagine 800 degrees turbine, why not? Something like that, steam turbine.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I suppose that's the backup generator. They were using a generator from the whole dam upstream, but that got blown up, so no one decided to build the dam back again. I don't know why. Whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, next to the great dam to provide the electricity on the whole thing, or it has to be in amongst the glacial caverns underneath there, so that you can have your bodies on cold storage as long as you need them, because a lot of the time refrigeration wasn't available back then. They had those icemen that would I remember from the same era, the Three Stooges skit where, they're the Icemen and they get the big cube of ice and they go hauling it up all the stairs, and by the time they get up there, it's just a tiny little ice cube. And they have to drop the ice cube into the bucket and they go back down and they get another big old ice block, and by the time they get up, it's just, they're doing it one ice cube at a time, effectively, despite all the work they do.
Yeah.
And that's what refrigeration technology was like back then, and that's...
Yeah.
A little weird to wrap my head around because I grew up around fridges,
So they had to pick that location because...
If you want to keep a body on cold storage sort of thing, and you wanted to preserve your specimens, and you had a lot of specimens or big specimens to preserve, it was either large, just amazingly huge tubs of formaldehyde, which I suppose you could make for an interesting... So this is a particular swamp we're located in, whereby it has amazing preservative properties in the natural bacteria here, so that's how I can get large things pickled and preserved. Which could work, I think, as for some sort of thing. Yeah, science thing. It doesn't necessarily need to be like Frankenstein stuff, but yeah, you want to preserve your stuff, and it's the old-fashioned style on top of the subterranean ice caves.
Yeah, well, and there might be only one spot like that in all of Europe with ice caves and a hot spring so near to each other, and that's why his castle or his laboratory was built there.
The Frankensteins had their castle built there because they were remnants from the Roman era, and the Romans used to use the springs as a natural bath before there was a small earthquake and it heated up too much.
Oh yeah.
They said it had revivificative properties that would heal people, and then I think they were making an allusion to that. So now it's 800 degrees. There's so much more. You can even bring back the dead this way.
Oh, I like that. That's very poetic.
Well, it's one of the ways they tried to explain off because, the reason why they had Frankenstein originally, animate up was there was that story going about in France, like, he brought a dead person to life with electricity, and it was no, he just made a dead corpse twitch really violently with an electrical impulse properly.
Right.
But at the time they were getting stuff like, you can bring back the dead to life with electricity, and then once the truth got out, in the movies, they had to come up with a way not to sound like they're just speaking out their arse. So it's like, no, he actually didn't capture and bring him into life with electricity. He caught cosmic rays from space that brought it. And we believe the origin of life came from the waves of outer space. Versus like, oh no, these springs were thought to have good health properties and, make even the sickest person become healthy again before they got too hot. And now they have extra energies, so if you don't, dip a body in there, which will, basically poach it, it would bring even the dead back to life because who knows mysterious Earth reasons.
Well, no, and what I like about that too, though, is that if there were sort of like a Dr. Frankenstein starting out, or his grandfather, or somebody being like, okay, I want to research the secrets of life, like how to bring someone back to life. So I don't have any idea how to do that. Where am I going to start? Oh,
Paris.
There's
you go to school in Paris, and that's how you start.
Okay.
Once you're done with that, then your studies, you go off wherever you want.
But then you discover in an old dusty tome, oh, there's this spring in the Alps or the mountains of Transylvania.
They never distinctly said exactly where all this stuff was happening. It was rural Europe, though.
Okay. There's the what are they called? The Carpathians.
Yeah.
And this old book. There's this legend of this spring that brings people back to life. Well, maybe I'll start there, and then they go down that line of research.
I did my natural studies, and I found indeed it does have amazing rejuvenative properties. How to harness it, though, that is the main question. How to harness it to bring the dead back to life for good.
Exactly, and then but after that they sort of bring in other areas of expertise or disciplines from, what if I tried electricity, and sort of maybe that's a dead end. The hot springs is like, well, it worked so far, but actually this line of electricity is actually working better. But I have my whole lab here now, so might as well just keep working. And
well, storms happen anywhere, so haul them up to the roof.
Yeah.
But yes, you do need a good location sort of thing. So I can imagine if you really want to have the nice exotic locale, you could have this mad scientist laboratory on the side of a volcano, and they use this natural heat conductive turbine sort of thing there to generate his electrical power to cause shocks and whatnot.
That'd be good.
Or even properly boil chemicals that would not naturally boil and combine at, they require 700 degree temperatures, but I'm not going to create a big fire just for that. Just stick it out underneath the basement window down here, and oh hey, now we're boiling. Bring it back in.
Yeah.
So that's always nice. And of course, you can always say a nice subterranean crystal area. These crystals are arranged in such an interesting way with a crystal lattice unseen elsewhere in nature. But it almost demands a unique setting, something very theatrical, one way or another.
Okay.
You don't just build a tower out in the middle of the woods and say, yes, now I'm a mad scientist out here. Unless they're, special woods. As I alluded to earlier, you can make a swamp, and that's how they pickle their preserved specimens sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Something that's different, something that, that you wouldn't see somewhere normal. Because if it was a normal place, there'd be normal people there. Normal people leading normal, honest lives. And these are mad scientists we're talking about, and they're not leading normal, honest, or good lives. They must be excluded by society as almost like a default. You don't encounter very many mad scientists working just offside of the town center.
Yeah.
Even if they are the Frankensteins and they're, they've ruled the land for centuries, since the Romans left.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I go back to the three main properties. Glowing things seem to be big.
Okay, yeah.
That's why the Tesla coils have always been popular, is they produce that nice natural halo in the old black and white so that they really do glow like you're sitting in a dark theater. It's like, ooh, it's like a firework.
Mm-hmm.
Glowing stuff works very interestingly as a background thing in a lot of more colorized sets, especially when they're just starting colorization processes.
Mm-hmm.
It just, especially with the right color, it really indicates what's going on. Is it a pale green? Then it must be something mutagenic. Is it blue? Maybe revivicative. Is it red? It will drive you to, the base emotions sort of thing. And so person, otherwise not cultured in the stuff, can intuit what's going to happen based on the color everything's going on here.
Another thing about glowing things, and especially like before electrification, before electricity became a thing.
Phosphorus. Oh my goodness! You know how much you wind up having to pay for purified phosphorus back in the day?
Yeah, well, and the world was was a darker place, and like
very literally in this case. We're not just talking about like they didn't know what the hell they were doing, in the labs. No.
Yeah.
This was physically darker.
Yeah, and sure there were candles and gaslight and things, but if you had,
it costs money to keep the candles light, and that was a decent amount of money because good candles cost a lot.
It's funny because in our modern world, like neon lights are kind of kitsch. Like they're like, oh, whatever. I don't know.
It's kind of low class.
Neon.
I mean, look at all the neon coming out of the window here. Really?
But if you somehow have to convey to, I guess, a reader or a player that, no, your character has never encountered something glowing like this. Like,
here's the best part, though, is in a D&D thing, you can utilize terms that can't physically exist.
Okay.
Like, I remember the color fullerin. Do you know what color fullerin is?
I don't know.
It is what is black, but then you'd make it even blacker.
Oh, okay.
It is what black happens after you get even darker than that. You have like a fulleginous cloak, and so it is just blacker than black. And can that really exist? No. Can you say something blacker than black, as it still seems to like utter a black light coming up there? So you can get like instead of a lightsaber, like a black saber, like a dark saber. It radiates darkness. Could you ever really show that? Be pretty darn hard outside of standard comic animation styles.
Yeah, well, I can imagine like sort of doing something that has an interesting effect. It might be like a black, like a little bit shiny, but like.
Well, that's the thing. It's hard to describe, but by saying the term, it is blacker than black.
Yeah.
In the darkness will never seem as dark again after you've seen this. Rah. Lovecraft did that sort of thing with the color out of space. The color that was coming up out of the well that everything wound up glowing with a hue of was a color never before seen, something unnatural. Did you describe what it was? No. Most people wind up thinking about it as like, oh, it must have been like a radiation, sickly pale green. But no, it was something else. Terry Pratchett's Discworld series has an 8th color, octarine.
Mm-hmm.
What color is it? Well, it's an 8th color. It's unlike any of the other colors. So how can you imagine a new color, Josh? No, but you can describe it just by saying the concept of it. And so that way you can say, oh, this must be someone working with necromancy because they've got fulleginous, like potions hanging up there that seem to suck the light in. Meanwhile, this person must be, we'll say a transmuter, and they've got like the beginnings of an alchemist stone because you can see all 7 colors swirling, including the octarine, that you would never thought you'd actually see in person. You've only seen it, described in old text being kept, copied, by monks after centuries, sort of thing. So in that case, the verbal format of D&D has a very distinct advantage in that just by relaying an impossible concept to the person, you save a lot of animation budget that you might have to do in a movie or a cartoon.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So I gotta say, if you're doing a Mad Scientist lab, spend some time online and just like Google up like impossible concepts or impossible wondrous thoughts, or go read some of the Alice in Wonderland things to help get you in the mood and come up with something that can't exist properly, but you can still describe. And bam, you've really set the stage for this is not a good place to be, and yet it's a wondrous place.
Right, yeah. I like that. Yeah, good and wondrous.
Because that way you really do make the most of the verbal format that way.
Yeah.
And hey, if that's the advantage of the format, take the most out of it every time you get the opportunity. So.
Sure. I mean, to an extent. I mean, I like worlds that players can relate to some degree.
Well, that's the thing, though. But you don't have to have like a special effects budget to describe a very wondrous sword fight between the hero and the villain sort of thing. Like, if you have the proper budget and you had Ray Harryhausen to animate, yes, you can have Sinbad fight an 8-armed statue of Kali. And during like the 7 Voyages of Sinbad. Now it was good to see. Google up that. That's a nice fight scene there. That's very good animation and very well done. But that cost a decent amount of time and money and effort to make happen. But all you have to do is describe, like say, oh yes, the 8 arms slash out like a typhoon of shrapnel at you. You're able to deflect them with your amazing puissant arms sort of thing. And congratulations, you've saved yourself $100,000 because of the format you're doing it in.
Yeah.
Or say 20 hours of animation time because you're not like doing flash animation of it instead. Take advantage of the bonuses that your format provides. Definitely.
Cool.
So yeah.
Can we talk about creatures? Like, what sort of creatures? Is it all Frankenstein's monster? Would you encounter homunculuses? What about pigeons? Like messenger pigeons and...
well, so that's the sad thing about it is that the reoccurring concept with a lot of these old movies with the mad science is that ugly is evil.
Yeah, okay.
Whether one spawns the other because you're evil because you're ugly or you're ugly because you're evil. I don't like to think about that too much because it's very much untrue. Very beautiful people can be very evil, and very ugly people can be very noble at heart.
I think we have a few examples of that in like modern sort of storytelling.
Reality itself will help provide that. Beauty does not equal goodness.
Although I suppose that there's still the whole Hollywood bias for good-looking
it's not just
heroes.
Hollywood. There was an actual case in ancient Greece about a lady who was so beautiful. She was like a kind of like a concubine prostitute sort of thing. She was put up on trial for like murder or whatever charges, and her defense had her stripped naked in front of the jury, and she was so beautiful they said she couldn't possibly be evil. She got off scot-free. So kind of a weird situation there. But yeah, it's not just Hollywood that equates goodness with beauty. But the Hollywood style is what narrates the movies effectively. So Frankenstein, kind of bilateral, but very much unnatural and ugly. Gross distortions of this and that. And that's why he's got the flat head sometimes. And he's got this bad jaw and the bolts coming out. And the hunchback, the hunchback that helps the evil, mad scientist sort of thing. Definitely not bilateral symmetry. So if you were to have like a messenger pigeon that works like some sort of correspondence between two mad scientists sort of thing, it might behoove you to have a second head, something off onto the side.
That'd be cool.
Or just just misshapen sort of thing, like gross and large and feathers falling out sort of thing.
Yeah.
Or just make it a buzzard instead. Something that eats the carrion. Like, wow, this test is done. I don't need any more. Feed it to the bird. Well, actually, with the chemicals some of the mad scientists work with, maybe that's why it's so big and ugly and mutated. It might make for an interesting scene because the birds as the movie made for a very nice effective villain. So you could have a minor villain point of like the hero comes to storm the mad scientist castle, but is attacked by the evil like a messenger vulture trying to save its food source.
Yeah. So
at least that way you get a pre-fight scene in before he goes into the real tete-a-tete with the mad villain. So not a bad idea that way, I suppose.
Yeah. And of course, like aristocrats will have horses, like stables. They might have kennels with dogs in them.
Oh, very much. That's a different way to show the aristocratic style. Is to own and have a decent amount of animals.
Or falcons, for that matter.
Oh
yes, falcons.
There's nice heraldry going on with that as well.
Or of course, if it's fantasy, wyverns or something. Like,
Maybe that's how they were created in the first place. Maybe they're like a Frankenstein chimera sort of thing, and then they wound up breeding true, and the couple next generations didn't look so bad because there's not so many stitches going on. I will state, I remember from The Bride of Frankenstein, the evil Dr. Pretorius, the stuff he had created. He was able to create life from just like effective cell creations. Like he made a mermaid from like kelp sort of thing. Unfortunately, he was never able to get the size right, so his little homunculi, as they were called, were, say, at the most half the size of your hand.
Okay.
So, just having something on a different style or different size works well for showing a mad scientist laboratory. A more modern one that you can find, and I definitely recommend viewing this, is Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow. Because it's a nice hark back to the old stuff, and it's a pretty good movie in its own.
Yeah.
And in the mad scientist lab, not a bad mad scientist, by the way, just a good mad scientist being hunted sort of thing. They have a nice little scene of an elephant that fits in like a jar. It's so small it fits in the jar. And then, it's a simple effect, to show like the one scale versus the other. The technology is very old. It is getting close to a century-old technology now. But if you want to show that things are unnatural happening here, an elephant in a bottle works very well. You don't have to have them alive. You can have an elephant pickled in a bottle sort of thing, and that indicates almost the more sinister stuff because, let's face it, when was the last time you saw something pickled in a jar of formaldehyde that didn't look creepy and unnatural?
Oh, well, yeah, I was going to say, you see them from time to time in TV shows, but...
They never look good. They always look weird and distorted and unnatural, and that's something to be done, just as a matter of course. That said, you can even make them, maybe the formaldehyde doesn't work fully. Maybe you have a beating heart sitting somewhere.
Ooh, that's fun.
And you know what the thing is? The technology for that ain't that hard to come up with either. If I could get a little scratch money, I would have a beating heart in a jar as something to buy and put on display.
Like a pig's heart? Or
no, it wouldn't be.
Heart?
It wouldn't be. Well, it would look like a real human heart, and it'd just be a little base switch sort of thing, runs on batteries, and it's just like the same sort of fluid you see in a lava lamp. And then just the fake animatronic heart that looks like it's beating. Just flip the switch there and boom, 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 boom.
Oh, that's cool.
And have another switch for lights, and so it winds up glowing with an underlit thing for added sinister stuff. You don't tell me you would not want that somewhere on your shelves. And yet,
I
no
don't know
one's
if I have
making
the
this.
space for it, but if I
You
had
would
more
make
space,
space if you had this thing. You would find some books and say, "I really don't need these. I'm moving outside," and you put that in there and you click it off.
I'd rather have a fake, disgusting beating heart.
And like a beating heart in a jar thing with a nice underlight going on.
Okay, if I had the space, I would keep that on my shelf.
Dang straight. And that's why I need to win the lottery. That's my argument for it. I would make that happen. I would make that a thing.
You don't get to win the lottery by writing an essay, Ryan. You win it randomly.
That's not working out so well for me in the long run. So I'm going to try any which method I get. Although I suppose if I was to do a decent research in there, a Kickstarter campaign could fund the whole darn thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, you could just write a letter to everybody who does win the lottery and say, hey, I have this cool idea.
Boy, do I got a good idea for you. This thing's going to make its own money back in like 5 years.
But at the same time, if you're writing letters to people with money, that's another way to... There's Kickstarter, there's venture capitalists. There's all kinds.
I could go on Dragon's Den. So,
Yeah.
This is a prototype. Don't tell me you would not like this. Here, we have different styles for bases, so you can have like a sci-fi text style base or thing. You can just have a plain, like it's like an ionic column sort of style base. Or, if you want, we can just have it look like it's just a basic jar with a black bump on the bottom sort of thing, and that's all it is.
Yeah.
Different styles. All it is an aesthetic difference. We can wind up doing that at very minimal extra cost.
Hey, you could 3D print them maybe.
Oh, well, that's the thing. That's the feature, man.
Yeah.
And like the concept of a beating heart is not that hard to do. You just get the shape on a plastic mold, and then you have just something that pushes at the right spot.
Yeah. Okay, well...
there's my tangent for the day.
There we go. We've gone over time a little bit, but do you have final thoughts on, the trappings of science?
Mad science is showy. It is the opposite of actual science. You can change the world with what you're doing in a real scientific laboratory. The average layman can come in, look at it, and see nothing of importance. You could have stem cell stuff going on that could wind up revolutionizing all sorts of stuff. You could have some way to take two halves of a human brain, put them together, and just do I call this like a caulking gun made out of stem cells. You just put that in between, and it winds up putting all the neurons back in, and it'll take and put any severed neural connection back together like that. But you know what? The average person is not going to see it and go, whoa, you must be doing something unnatural, like restoring, like nerves back, to life sort of thing, and putting brains together in weird ways. That's not going to look that way.
They wouldn't put two and two together.
No, because
it doesn't look like it.
Most science is not that showy. It would be a lot of petri dishes showing stuff on how it's working in here, and they'd have to look at different petri dishes and see the annotations on each one. Mad science is intensely showy. It is inherently theatrical. It is above and beyond. Do this next time you come up with a mad scientist laboratory. Come up with a cool design and say, no, me. It must be cooler than that. It must be more theatrical. And you do that twice more until you come up with something that's almost hammy over the top. That's where you've got your nice mad scientist laboratory location and style and whatever else is going on.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. And if you want to do like sort of the real, I don't know, the good guy science, it is more of that sort of compartmentalized, a drawer for everything, books, not necessarily like tons of, although maybe one or two specimens out, but not a lot of specimens, just a lot of carefully cataloged stuff.
And as a side note on this whole thing, it also, how you enter the thing. If you come into the room and the mad scientist is already there, he's been spending countless hours there, that's how you know he's evil. If you come in when the good scientist opens the door for the day because he'd gone home and slept that night,
yeah,
then that's how you know it's good science.
Yeah.
The mad scientist is his work. The good scientist knows to stop for the night. Everything gets put away. He goes home, has supper, talks with his friends or his wife or, well, hey, it's the modern era. Maybe he goes home and talks with his life partner / husband.
Okay. Well, what about the assistants? Like, we've talked about a mad scientist having an Igor or a hunchback.
And that's the thing, is some good scientists have had good people. I remember one with a female-type Igor. She was hunchbacked, and she was working because he could do stuff that would help manipulate bone, like kind of turn it into like a clay-like thing and re-sculpt it and then let it harden again into a more proper form. Which, by the way, if you can get anywhere close to that in real life, boy, howdy, you've got yourself the next Nobel Prize in biology. So don't give up hope on that. But be careful with what you do. I mean, very careful stuff with nerves and bone stuff going on in the spine. Careful.
So there's your PSA. When you are doing spinal surgery on your friends...
well, if you find some way to clarify...
Measure twice, cut once.
Yeah. Or, well, preferably not, unless you've got, your caulking gun of...
Don't measure, just cut.
No. Always measure. And
always measure.
Sculpt. Shape the bone into its proper form. No cuts at all, ideally. But be careful as to how much you don't want to wind up pinching a nerve. That way they wind up with like a dead foot, and then they're proper standing up, but they're always moving kind of with a weird limp because their foot's dead because they can't feel anything.
And they have a hunchback.
Well, no, because you've fixed the hunchback,
okay.
but you've pinched a nerve in there, and yeah. So they're walking with like a partial crutch or a cane.
She did more harm than good.
Hey, they don't have a hunchback anymore, sort of thing. And that's so you've cured 50% of it. Now they have to fix the foot thing.
Okay.
And, yeah.
But good assistants are like, I don't know.
Good assistants are proper assistants. In this case, the good hunchback lady, nurse that was with there, she wore the proper outfit. She wore a nurse's outfit, not the modern, I'm wearing kind of pajamas sort of style. Which I think is still good. You want something you can take off and clean easy, proper, and still looks clean. So is
it like the burlap peasant's sack? Kind of
well, that's kind of what the conventional Igor would wear, sort of thing. He'd just be wearing any old clothes. Yeah, I was digging up corpses with this earlier tonight. I just kind of brushed myself down and went into the lab. They don't wear the proper outfit. They wore rags, sort of thing. And so, basically, a good scientist has good working hours. And has a decent uniform, whereas the mad scientist has got all, gone to heck, and they are not obeying proper work standards at all. They're probably not even paying their assistant very well, if not outright bribing them into forcing them to work for free. So, there's that to consider, too. Evil scientists don't follow workplace regulations.
Yeah, although, well, of course, we can bring up the evil overlord list again and say that, if the evil overlord sort of follows some of the suggestions on the list, it's like, actually pay your minions, and they might actually shoot the good guys for you.
Or here's the thing: follow through with your promises. What wound up getting the mad scientist in the House of Frankenstein was he made a lot of promises and never ever really intended to follow through on anything but what he wanted. He wanted Frankenstein's notes so he could follow through with that work he was doing on transplanting brains. Because, Frankenstein was able to put a brain in a body, and he was earlier working on putting a human brain in a dog body. I don't know how well that would work. The brain case thing works weird, but whatever. He was, he got the hunchback, jailmate assistant of his to help him out by promising he would put his brain into a perfect body, sort of thing. He told Larry Talbot that he would help him out, in easing his pain and prevent the transformations into a werewolf. And he had no intention of following through. He wound up getting strangled by his own assistant because he would not follow through on his promises. So, good work ethic, good science, bad work ethic and bribes and cajoling, bad science.
There you go. So.
Yeah. A bad scientist is not just more than just, like unethical work. He is unethical in all parts of his life.
Great.
There you go. Long story short.
There we go. That's been a podcast.
Short
story long. This one went a little long. I hope you don't mind, listeners, hanging out with us for a little while. Thank you for sticking around. Thank you for coming back, and we'll see you again. You will hear us again next week.
And just for note, you might not be able to see us, but as I am the co-host, I'm equivalent to the Igor, but I do not have a hunchback. Just in case, because, I have set myself up as effectively the Igor to your Frankenstein, with me co-hosting, you proper host.
Okay, yeah.
So, Josh doesn't control me or whip me and to make me do this sort of stuff. It's of my own free will. He's a good host, the same way we talked about, is with a good scientist.
Yes, well, you shall not get whipped after this episode anyway.
Yay!
But maybe we'll put up some. Eventually, we'll get some pictures up on there so that people can see sort of what we look like.
Oh, maybe if we want to dress up next year for the Godicon, we could do as like a Frankenstein and Igor thing, and then I'll go as the Hunchbacks or stuff.
You really want to do that? Okay. Well,
my daughter will be old enough. I can do like kind of like a like a thing from Total Recall.
Can she be like a second head?
Yeah, she'll be just sitting on top of me. I'll be hunched over, and she'll be like, "Start the reactor, Quaid," and she'll just be like the extra body on the top.
Yeah, she'll probably be speaking by then. So
I think we have a chance at winning this with a really imaginative costume. All right.
Okay, so I think
pinning that for next year.
I've been Josh Trelevin this whole time.
I've been Ryan Kirkby.
And thanks for listening. We'll see you again next week.